And we are live. Welcome to NFL where the NFL starts and ends. Over the next half hour or so, we will be discussing the NFL league meeting that is happening right now, as well as Von Miller's injury, Kyler Murray's injury, and who did the Bills and Cowboys sign as wide receivers. Well, the first thing that happened is let's talk about the NFL league meetings. The NFL, every so many months, will meet together. The owners will. Some players are involved. That's why they call the NFLPA. The Players Association is involved. Everyone goes to this thing. And this week, or this meeting, they're going to discuss the injury to Devontae Parker that happened on Monday night, where Parker gets his side of his head driven into the ground. And when he gets up, he kind of looks glazy-eyed, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And the Patriots offensive lineman, or rookie offensive lineman Cole Strange, looks in and is like, Devontae, are you okay? To which he's like, yeah, but he's not. Like, you can see this, obviously something going on. And what happens is they're going quickly, so he's not really getting back to the huddle right away. And so he sets up, and great job by his teammate Nelson Aguilar to go and be like, no, we're not running this play. We're not running a play until Devontae Parker's off the field because he's definitely concussed. So he's like, no, we're not doing it. No. And that got the referee's attention. They went to see what was happening, and Aguilar's like, no, you gotta get him off the field. He's not like there's something going on. So they bring Parker off the field, which Aguilar got a lot of praise for doing, and rightfully so. So the NFL is going to discuss the handling of that whole situation, of what should have happened and what did in fact happen. What they should have saw is that he was looking crazy. He was looking all over the place. He didn't know where he was. And the official should have been like, no, wait, nope. We're dragging him off the field. We're taking him off. He's not going to do this. And that's what should have happened. Didn't happen that way. I get it, but that's what the NFL is going to discuss. Another thing the NFL is going to discuss at this meeting is the possibility of Daniel Snyder not being an owner anymore. Snyder has gotten in a lot of trouble over the last couple years. From the stadium not being up to code, when all those Eagles fans, when they were all near the barricade, fell and almost actually injured Jalen Hurts, as the barricade was held together by zip ties, which are not very sturdy. If you've actually seen a zip tie and you tie it to something, it's easy to come off, it's easy to break. They're fairly strong, but it's not going to be a difference if you just pull it. So the zip ties incident with the barricade and people falling, that was one thing. The scamming the owners by using 2 books, because what you have to do is show the owners how much you made this year. That impacts the salary cap. And Washington was always near the bottom, or so it appeared. It was then found out that he had 2 books, which is also considered fraud, or scamming the shareholders, is another way to describe it, or keeping everyone in the dark, having 2 books. Here's the book I want to give you. Here's the book about what we actually got. That's what happened. And then various other accusations that the NFL is looking into, and not just the NFL, but the government is looking into. So, in all of this, there was a discussion earlier in the year about what would the NFL do, because the NFL is already dealing with the John Gruden stuff, which actually ties into this perfectly, because when the NFL was looking for evidence about Daniel Snyder, or their general manager at the time, Allen, I believe his name was Bruce Allen. I'm not exactly positive on that. And the comments that they enclosed and said, the only emails that they got out of it was the John Gruden emails of what was sent to the vice president at the time, which is what got Gruden fired or resigned. It's just a playful way to say he would let go. But what actually happened was the NFL is in a lawsuit right now about releasing those emails, to which the NFL is like, we didn't release those emails. It's now being let known that Washington and the Commanders were the ones to release those emails. So that's a whole nother thing about what's going on with Daniel Snyder. And hang on, I want okay, there we go. So that's a whole nother thing. The question is, what's it going to be like? Well, the best way I can describe it is this. Snyder, according from what I heard, is not going to be asked to sell the team at this present time. And how it was described was the team would be sold. So I'm going to just classify it as the sale word is not going to be on the Washington Commanders' heads as of right now. But possibly by March, which is when the annual meeting happens, that could be a different distinction, as very much a lot of owners showed their displeasure to Daniel Snyder. In fact, Jim Irsay says we need to talk about it. This guy shouldn't be an owner. And there's a lot of owners that agree with me. Now you need 24 owners to go and say, we want out. We want him out, and we're going to get him to be gone. Now, there is a lot of Snyder was saying that there was a lot of that he has quote unquote dirt on every owner, which again, not putting him in their good graces. That could also be the thing that keeps him around because the owners are afraid. That could also happen. But that will only be discussed at a later date. But as of right now, it doesn't look like they're going to force Snyder to sell right now, but definitely could be in the future. Next up, Von Miller did in fact tear his ACL. He's done for the year. We said this on Monday. Von Miller, when he tore it, he didn't know he tore it. They did the x-rays, they did the MRI, they didn't see anything. They did exploratory surgery, and that's when they found it. And Von Miller said on the Pat McAfee show this past week that he was planning to retire after the year was over. Because he's like, I'm going to go to one team, or go to a team, have some success, then retire. That's what I'm going to do. Now that's all up in the air, whether or not he still retires or doesn't retire. He's still going to be one of the greats. There's no doubt about that. But when you brought him in to be a closer, which is what he was. to not have him on the field and you having to rely on players that just aren't as they don't have the pedigree that Von Miller has. It definitely does not help the fact that your secondary is also injured. Like, not having Von Miller out there is a big loss, and now everyone else is gonna have to play above of what they've already done. Mark Ingram also had an injury as he tore his MCL. He's done for the year. He was playing. They played, and there was one play he was playing on one leg essentially. He was running, but he ran out of bounds. And you question why would he run out of bounds? Why would he run out of bounds? He ran out of bounds because he couldn't really go anywhere. He was on one leg and was in pain. And at first, he probably tore it a little bit, but didn't really know. He knew there was pain, but he didn't know exactly how bad or what it was. Once he got to the out of bounds, he was like on the ground. He couldn't. It all went, and there it is. That's what happened. So he's done for the year. Another player, another key player, I should say, who tore another ligament, actually both ligaments in his knee, is Cowboys right tackle Terrence Steele. He tore his ACL and his MCL. Now, this is conflicting reports because Ian Rappaport, who I'm mostly going with all the time on these situations, said it was MCL damage, but it was a clean break. So therefore, he should be ready come training camp. Adam Schefter, who I don't if I get something from Schefter, I cross-reference it like I do with Rappaport. But Rappaport's pretty much got his eye on the ball on these things. Schefter's like, no, he also tore his MCL, and that there was almost structural damage. And so you always have to figure this out. According to the Cowboys, he tore both his ACL and MCL. He's done for the year. Now the question is, if you're the Cowboys, what do you do? The Cowboys decided to put Josh Ball from Madison, who was a draft pick last year, on the field at right tackle. 26 snaps later, after 26 snaps, they decided, we're pulling him. We've had enough. We're good. Let's put Jason Peters out there and see what we got. Now, the reason why that happened is one of the last two plays I think Josh Ball had resulted in a fumble that he recovered and in an interception that almost cost the Cowboys the game. On both plays, Ball got beat so badly that Dak's arm kept getting hit. So they decided to put Jason Peters out there, which, by the way, Jason Peters has not taken reps at the right tackle position since 2005. Put that in perspective, I'm 21 years old. I was 4 years old when Jason Peters took reps at right tackle. That's how long he's done it. He hasn't done this in over 15 years. That's insane. So, and everyone asks, well, what's the difference between Jason Peters? Or what was he doing that Josh Ball wasn't? Jason Peters said, I know I haven't taken snaps at right tackle since '05, but I know what I didn't know exactly how to do it and prepare for it. So I just stood in front of the guys and hoped it worked out, and it did. Now, according to the Cowboys, that they said that there was going to be a rotation at right tackle. Don't really see why they would do that, especially as Mike McCarthy, the head coach Mike McCarthy, had said he's a rock. And talking about Terrence Steele, he said he's a rock, meaning that he's there. He's actually made himself into a good football player. He's doing all the right things, as Dick Vermeil, the former coach of the Rams, used to say, just keep doing the right things right, and everything will work out. And that's That's what Terrence Steele did. He was an undrafted player out of Texas Tech, had to start because of the Lyle Collins situation about Collins getting hurt. Terrence Steele has to step in. First year was rough. He didn't play well. He was okay, but he didn't play well. Second year, Collins gets suspended. Here comes Terrence Steele. Mass improvement. You could tell he worked hard to get to that point. And then this year, his third year in the league, actually the starting right tackle, besides that bad game against the Bucks, he's been sensational. He had 4 penalties against the Bucks. He's only had 6 penalties all year. And he's allowed only 1 sack. He's done his job as a tackle. That's what you ask of your tackle to do. So him not being there is a massive loss. Another massive loss is Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray tore his ACL 3 plays into the game versus the Patriots, as it was a non-contact injury, which those are the worst injuries because there's nothing you could have done. It happened 3 plays into the game. As soon as I turn the TV on, all I see is Kyler on the ground, and there's a coat, and Colt McCoy's getting ready to go. Which we will talk about the Patriots and Cardinals in the recap portion of this. But that's very unfortunate. As a lot of people said, this is a lost season. I don't classify it as such. I classify it as a disappointing year, as you don't have Hopkins for the majority of at least the first part of the year. You got guys coming in and out. Offensive line is mutilated with injuries. Defense is the best part of your team, and yet they still can't find a way to stop anybody. It was a very lackluster year, to best describe it. And it ends with Kyler Murray being injured. This was a very, I guess I would use the word, interesting season for Kyler Murray, as he missed 2 games, but he got a big contract before the Super Bowl, saying the Cardinals are in danger of losing my services as their quarterback. So, and basically saying I deserve to be paid. Undeniable. He deserves to be paid, obviously. But you just pay your coach and general manager, then you give Kyler a big extension, and then you get a rocky start because Hopkins isn't there. Rondale Moore gets hurt. AJ Green misses time. Zach Ertz is gone for the year. You got injuries all over the place. And on top of all that, when you do win games, it's because Kyler has to be great. When you don't win games, it's because Kyler did not throw for 300 yards and didn't run for over 100 yards. That's concerning. And that's, I think, a lot of reason why Kingsbury is getting a lot of flack is how much are you going to rely on Kyler Murray bailing you out? Because you're not going to win if Kyler's not going to throw for 300, run for another 100, and maybe you get away with 3.1. You can't. You can't do it because that's not going to work. Both the Cowboys and the Bills signed wide receivers this past week. The Cowboys decided to sign T.Y. Hilton, and the Bills decided to sign Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley unretired after a 9-week retirement, signed back with the Bills. Hilton never officially retired, but he kept quiet through the remainder of the year. And I think the reason why the Cowboys went inside T.Y. Hilton and why the Bills went inside Cole Beasley, they were in on the OBJ sweepstakes, if you will. But when they heard that OBJ's not going to work out, he's not going to run, he's not going to do any of this. And either it's because he can't, because he's not ready, or he's choosing not to. Either way, he's not working out. And we can only go by the medical. And the medical say he's not ready. So we should probably look at other options. The Cowboys talked to T.Y. Hilton in the offseason, chose James Washington over T.Y. Hilton. Cole Beasley left the Bills, signed with the Bucks, sent to their practice squad, was there 2 games and said that I'm not making as much money as these other guys, and those guys are going to get play time over me. I'm not going to play. I'm just going to leave. I'm going to retire. And that's what happened. Hilton is not obviously what he once was. 33 years old, can't run the way he used to, but he works his tail off. Beasley is very similar, works his tail off. Both are very similar in height, about 5'10". Skill sets are different, but when you ask anybody about those 2 guys, they always say they're the hardest working people. So I think this is a good move. It's not saying the Cowboys or the Bills are out on OBJ, but it's saying for right now, we're going in this direction. We'll circle back if we have to, but right now we're going in this direction. And the Bills are saying the same thing. Next up, the Cowboys. This is a great story. In week 15, will travel to Jacksonville. And expected, according to Mr. Jerry Jones, is expected to also include Tyron Smith playing at some capacity. Now, Tyron Smith, I should say, in late August 24, tore his hamstring from his knee. A very interesting place to tear it because most injuries if you tear your hamstring is a 6 to 8 week injury. If you tear it in your thigh, he tore it behind his knee, and it was in the Cowboys do this practice in Frisco where all the fans can show up. They don't have to pay to show up, and they can watch the Cowboys work out. And it was just a simple drill, and it looks again like when the injury occurred, I said it at the time. I don't know if it was a no huddle situation or if it was he was just trying to pick the running back up. All I remember is seeing him running and then seeing him go down and seeing him grab his knee. For him to go and say, no, I tore my hamstring from my kneecap, which is a very bizarre place to tear it. I was like, there's no way. Because the Cowboys kept saying 3 months and he'll probably be back at the end of the calendar year. I was like, there's no way. There's no way. You'll be lucky if you get him for playoff time. There's no way he comes back with in the final month of the calendar year. There's no way. That's just not possible. And yet, it's possible because he's proven it. Because in late November, around Thanksgiving, he was back at practice. He was in meetings. He was doing all these things, not training, necessarily with the team, but there. And he looked great, and he had no hitch in his step. As a lot of people say in Texas, there was no hitch in his giddy up. And we'll see what happens. But I think the Cowboys felt they wanted Tyron to play a little bit of the game, not knowing if he could play the full game. Now that's an interesting spot because of the injury to Terrence Steele. They're going to ask him, can he play at least a half? Maybe he can, maybe he can't. The injury to Tyron Smith was so bizarre that they surgically stapled it back. That's how they dealt with it. It was so bizarre. Normally, they'll tie it together. They surgically stapled it, which I don't know how you do. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one. So the fact that he was able to deal with that and come back and have no hitch, very impressive. Again, how much does he play? We'll see. I know the Cowboys feel like they want him to be fully re-immersed when they play the Philadelphia Eagles on Christmas Eve. Next up, the Jets have promoted Zach Wilson to backup quarterback. Now, you ask, why is this a big thing? Because the last couple of weeks, he's not been the backup quarterback. In fact, he's not suited up. It was Joe Flacco. And every Jet fan's like saying, Joe Flacco basically retired 2 years ago. He looks so out of it. Like there's no excitement in playing quarterback for him. There's nothing there. And I don't quite agree with that, but I feel like at some point you gotta get Zach Wilson to the point of you gotta understand this is your team. You're the second round. You're the second pick in the draft. At what point does it get through your head that I gotta actually listen to this team? I'm the captain. I'm the captain of this team. They're gonna follow me, but I have to listen to them. I have to understand what this locker room is feeling and not go and be like, yeah, I'm gonna do my own thing. Zach Wilson's career completion percentage is 58%, which is really bad. That means you're completing only about half of your passes, a little over half. So if you throw 20 passes, you're completing a little over 10 of them. Now it's great that you can throw the ball far. You can throw it far. It's like a flick of a wrist to you. But you gotta understand, these teammates have to trust you, and so far they don't. Next up is Micah Parsons had a couple comments on Jalen Hurts, and he was talking about the hype Jalen Hurts was saying he's an MVP. That everyone's saying he's an MVP candidate, which is true. It is true. No one will deny that. But I think everyone's trying to make this bigger thing than it actually is. This is a rivalry. Like that's how it is. It's a rivalry. It's been a rivalry. You can't stop a rivalry. That's just the way it is. These teams dislike each other. Their fan bases dislike each other. When you're born, when you are born, if you're born in Dallas or in Texas and you're a Cowboys fan, you are told the one thing that we all agree on is we despise the Eagles. In the same way, vice versa. If you're born in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania and you're an Eagles fan, the one thing you are told, you despise the Cowboys. That's the way it is. There's always been this. I'll tell you a quick story. Near Christmas one time, Philadelphia, they season was up for grabs, and they decided as Santa Claus is walking across the field, he's just walking across the field with presents, he starts getting pummeled with snowballs. To the point, they're not just snowballs. The snowballs with D batteries in them. They're throwing snowballs at him with D batteries. And my mom told me this a long time ago. It was about the Red Sox and Yankees rivalry. She said in the late 70s and 80s, the Red Sox, if they ever played the Yankees in New York and they were in the outfield, they had to wear their helmets because people would pummel them with anything, batteries, beer bottles. It was a danger zone over there when anytime the Red Sox played. It's very similar between the Cowboys and Eagles, where it just happens and it's very dangerous. So you always got to keep an eye on those things. But it's a rivalry. It is the way it is. I guarantee you, you talk to James Harrison or Ed Reed or Ray Lewis or any player on the Ravens, on the Steelers during the 2000s, they'll tell you the same thing. Man, I I want to win every game. Obviously, I want to win against those other teams, but we definitely want to beat the Ravens, and we want to pummel them, and vice versa. That's the way this is. Some people don't understand that. It's a very easy concept. I don't like you, you don't like me, but we're gonna fight it out. We're gonna duke this out, and we're gonna figure out who wins. It's a friendly rivalry with friendly band. See what happens. All right, a recap portion and preview of Week 15. We start off with the Week 13 matchup between the Bucks and the Saints. The Bucks beat the Saints 17-16 in a game where the Saints controlled the whole game. The Bucks didn't. But at what point are we going to say this Bucks defense is terrible? I mean, obviously Brady is not on the same page with any of his wide receivers. Obviously. Evans, he's not on the same page with Evans, he's not on the same page with Godwin, he's not on the same page with Gage. He's not. Probably the one person probably the two people he's has a connection with at this point is Julio Jones and the tight end, the rookie tight end. And again, at one point you're down 2 touchdowns, and Tom Brady has to score twice in 3.5 minutes, and he does that. But the Bucks try to give this game away as much as possible, and Brady brought them back. How many times, if Brady does decide he wants to continue doing this, at what point is he going to go and say, I don't want to be here, though, because we can't do anything. We're making mistakes for no reason. We're having to punt a whole time. If I want to continue doing this, am I doing it here? That's the real question. Next up, Cowboys outlast the Texans 27-23 in the Battle of Texas, which with the Generals Cup. It's very complicated to say, which is a real thing. This game, the Cowboys did not play their best ball. They did not. Anyone who says they did is a liar. That's the way it is. You're a liar. And I'm calling bullshit on you if you say they are. They weren't. They didn't play their best ball. Mistakes all around. Dalton Schultz was your leading receiver. He had 2 drops. One of them would have been a touchdown. You didn't target CeeDee Lamb enough. Noah Brown dropped some passes. You didn't run the ball enough. Tony Pollard had 40 yards. Zeke Elliott had 60 yards. That was it. Against a very vulnerable run defense. And yes, they did make plays, and the Texans were playing out of their mind. Calvin Joseph did not play well. And Chris Moore, the Houston Texans wide receiver, who nobody knows who he is. And if you do know, that's unless you're a Texans fan, it's very sad that you know who he is. He had 10 catches for over 100 yards. Again, like, there's a lot of concern about this. Now, again, they didn't play their best ball. A lot of injuries, including to Jonathan Hankins with a strained pec. Jake Ferguson, the backup tight end, with a concussion. Jaron Curse thought like he wasn't gonna go because he got hurt during warm-ups, but he did play. I think the Cowboys did not play their best ball. And then you got all these media pundits going and saying all these things about how the Cowboys aren't very good. You had an off game. The thing that you got to deal with, and we will talk about the Dolphins in a few minutes. The thing you got to deal with is you got to go tell them the next game, which is Jacksonville. We got to play our tail. We can't lose this. If we want any chance at all to beat the Eagles in 2 weeks' time, and it really say these last 2 weeks of the season are going to be very important to both teams, that is what's going to need to be said. If you're the Cowboys, you're telling your team, we got to win, and we got to play 100% Cowboy football through the whole game. Can they do it is the real question. But they got to show it, because you're going to go against guys like Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts. That's a lot that you have to deal with, and you got to figure it out. And you can't rely on Dak Prescott to pull you out of the ashes and bring you to a victory when you got teams that are that good. You can't afford to do that. Next up, Lions beat the Vikings 34-23 in a game like the Vikings are one of the more intriguing teams, I think, because their record says something, but the team says something else. Their record says we are 10-3, but their team says if we face a defense that actually can slow down our best wide receivers in Jefferson, Thielen, Osborne, and Dalvin Cook, and even T.J. Hawkinson, we're gonna lose because we can't. Our whole game plan is throw it up for Jefferson and then allow Thielen and Osborne to work off it, which is fine. But the problem is when you go against a team that can defend that and do a great job on that, that's when it causes problems. And for the Vikings, it is. The 3 games you've lost, 2 of them have been between the Eagles and the Cowboys, and this one's the Lions. It got so bad for you. The Lions threw a ball to the tackle, Penei Sewell, and he gained a first down. That's basically what iced the game. To give you a complete understanding, Dan Campbell was on the Pat McAfee show yesterday and went and said, we were practicing that play to Penei, and a fake punt which they ran on their own 27-yard line. For the last couple weeks, we've practiced it. And we were on that 4th down where we were gonna punt. We did the fake punt. And I didn't hit the button on my headset fast enough. And I had said, "Don't run it, punt it." But he didn't hear that. He said he heard run it, and therefore they did, and it worked. But he's like, "What are we doing?" I said, "Don't run it." And yet they did it anyway. It worked, but I said, "Don't do it." Then he went and for the Panay Sewell catch that ended up icing the game, he wasn't even paying attention. He's like, all the fans were doing the wave. I'm looking at that, and they said something, and I said it in passing, and they threw the ball to Panay. He's like, "What are we doing?" It was a lot of miscommunication. It worked out great, but it was a lot of miscommunication. But if you're the Vikings, you can't allow those two things to happen. The the fake punt, the pass to Panay Sewell, that can't happen. You're too good of a team to do that. And I heard a stat yesterday that it intrigued me a lot. The Vikings are the only team this year, are the only 10-win team this year to have a where they have scored less points than they've given up by a point. By a point, the one winning team that has happened to. That's insane. That's how they play. But that's what I'm talking about. When you go against an Eagles team that has a good defense, you go against a Cowboys team that has a good defense, when you go against the Lions who have a good defense, a very underrated defense, but a very good defense, you're not going to win those. But if you go against a team, like their best win was the Bills, and the Bills have a bad secondary because they're all injured. There's questions on that, and I think that's also deserves to be in the conversation. The Eagles beat the Giants in humiliating fashion, even though the score says 48-22. It wasn't even that close. If you can stop Saquon Barkley, you're gonna win. That's just the way it is. Next up, Bills beat the Jets 20-12 in a game where it looked like Mike White died 3 times as he got hit. There was one play where the linebacker for the Bills, Matt Milano, completely drills Mike White directly in the ribs, and it looks like it doesn't even look like it did happen. It looked, but it was like Mike White folded in half and hit the ground, and he was in pain. He hit over, and you can see in his face of just how much pain he is in. It got to the point they took him out. He came back in. He took another shot from Gregory Russo, who had major props to him, to Mike White. Like, I don't know how he stayed in. He was getting hit, and devastating shots over and over again, and just getting back up, found his way back on the field. They actually took him to the hospital because of how much he was getting hit. Like, that is insane. The fact that he was able to stay in was very impressive. But it just didn't lead to a win. Next up, 49ers devastate the Bucks 35-7 in a game where Tom Brady did not have his best game. But the defense, again, or the lack thereof, is not very good. They struggle. And maybe that's because they're on the field so much, and that's probably one of the reasons. But they make a lot of mistakes. They don't get pressure. I understand Shaq Barrett's gone. I get that. But you gotta be better than what you are. You gotta be better. Because you're hanging on to this division by a thread. By a thread. You play Carolina this week. Carolina, every team in that division is still up for grabs. That division's still up for grabs for all 4 teams. If Carolina wins and sweeps you, they would be the team in the lead for that. And Tom Brady may not make the playoffs. So the next 4 games, you face Carolina, you have to face Atlanta, and now you're talking about you have to find a way to win. But you guys haven't played well. And Carolina in the last couple of weeks has, because I believe that Carolina will give that job to Steve Wilkes if he finds a way to make it to this playoff for the playoffs. He may be the second coach behind Bruce Arians to win Coach of the Year as a head coach, as an interim head coach. That could happen because of how good they've played. Next up, Chargers beat the Dolphins 23-17 in a game of the second week in a row. Tua and the Dolphins don't look right for whatever reason. There's something going on. The Chargers, it wasn't like the Chargers were dominating them, but they were just better that day, and that's concerning if I'm the Dolphins. And last game of the recap, Patriots beat the Cardinals 27-13. Every time I watch the Patriots play, it's hurtful. It's hurtful. It's like someone's ripping out your soul because they don't move the ball at all. They don't move it. Can we get a tally number in the comment section of how many times Mac Jones yells at the sideline, at his sideline? Well, I don't know if he's yelling at Matt Patricia or Joe Judge, but can we get a tally? Because this is ridiculous. It's like every week he's screaming at somebody. We don't know if it's Matt Patricia. We assume it's Matt Patricia, but it could be Joe Judge. It could be somebody, but it's somebody, obviously. But we need to get a tally mark at this point because the Patriots' offense is stale. To the point you got 9, 10-year-olds saying another screen pass. That's what Rich Eisen was saying his son was doing. His son had went to work with him on Westwood One at the radio station, and his son had said in the green room when he was watching the game, another screen pass? Really? Another screen pass? What are we supposed to do? Because you're throwing the ball so much behind the line of scrimmage because you're so afraid of Mac Jones taking a shot. When they do, it's pretty good, but they don't do it a lot, and that's a lot to ask for. And Vance Joseph, who is the defense coordinator for the Cardinals, said it's like a defense coordinator calling offense, and that's exactly what it is. He would know. Didn't matter if Vance Joseph's team couldn't do it anyway, even though how bad the Patriots are. All right, preview of Week 15. Let's try to hurry this up. Seattle, the 49ers visit Seattle on Thursday Night Football. Seattle is favored by 3, is getting +3. This is an interesting game. No Deebo Samuel. There's no Deebo Samuel probably until the playoffs. Seattle has a terrible run defense. I am taking the 49ers only because of that. I would need Seattle to win this week because the game between the Giants and Washington, whoever wins, Seattle's taking their spot. That's what you need if you're Seattle. You need to win and find a way to do this. Next up, Dolphins versus Bills. Bills are favored by 7.5 in Buffalo. They showed the temperature supposedly of Sunday. It's supposed to be 77 in Miami and sunny. It's 28 in Buffalo and it's going to be snowing. I'm taking Buffalo. Next up, Cowboys. Actually, hang on. 49ers win. They beat Seattle 28-21. Bills beat Dolphins 24-17. Next up, Cowboys beat Cowboys vs. Jacksonville, excuse me, Jacksonville's favored by +4.